36, Thinking in Language. Me, you, my notes, and this coffee are going to see us home. Our objectives are to describe the structural units of a language, to discuss Skinner and Chomsky's contribution to how we acquire language, how much nature, how much nurture. And then we're going to look at some of the brain areas involved in not only processing language, but producing language as well. So the very first thing we have to do is we have to define language, which is pretty important. We do a language unit in human geography as well. And if you haven't signed up for human geography and have not taken it, I can promise you it's going to be a tremendous sign up for your scheduling. Anyway, languages. Languages are composed of this limited number of symbols that can be combined according to a particular set of rules. And these rules then can be put together to create this unlimited number of messages that we'll have, but we have to build from somewhere, right? And when we build, we have to start off with the basic, smallest distinctive sounds in a language. These are phonemes. These are our basic speech sounds, right? When you think of any sort of sound, ba, ka, da, right? These are all phonemes, right? In English, we have about 40 of them. Linguists and anthropologists, when they study all the languages out there, they've come up with about 869 different phonemes in human speech. So there's a lot. Like I said, English has about 40. There's a language in Papua New Guinea, native to a tribe there, that only has 11. I've seen one in sub-Saharan Africa that has over 140, right? So those are our phonemes. Next, we have our morphemes, the smallest unit of a language that actually carries meaning, right? So there has to be meaning attached to it. For example, like an S might imply plurality, but even for a word like there will be 3 for this word prefixes, because pre means before, that means something. Fix, and then the is means there's multiple, so there's 3 morphemes there. So these English phonemes, of which there are 40, make up over 100,000 morphemes, which make up over 600,000 words, which we can make a whole bunch of unbelievable sentences with. I feel like every day I say a sentence that I've never said before in my lifetime. And that's kind of cool, when you think about that. Okay, so let's do a little bit of practice. How many phonemes then would be in the word dogs? Try that out. If you came up with the number 4, you would be correct. D-A-G-Z. Now, staying with dogs, how many morphemes are in the word dogs? If you came up with 2, that would be correct. Dog there's a meaning with that, and then the S means there's more than a 1. Language is amazing. Your book starts off with this Steven Pinker quote. I'm not the biggest Steven Pinker fan. I'll go ahead and admit it to you here, but he said, we can sit for hours listening to other people make noises as they exhale because those hisses and squeaks contain information. Yeah, think about that. Like if you were not really from this planet, right? And you're coming through and you see people passing thoughts and ideas from one head to another head by pulsating air molecules. You'd be like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Well, believe it or not, that's actually what we do. When we think about our outer ear, our inner ear, our fluid-filled cochlea, going out through the auditory nerve to the temporal lobe. It's routed by the thalamus, by the way. It's quite amazing how we come to understand and communicate speech. Our motor cortex is involved with that as well. Okay, so in our first 18 years, 0 to 18, by the time we become adult, on average, we're learning about 60,000 words. That's a lot, right? And it's amazing how quickly we can process those words and produce those words, but hit you with that third bullet point. Half of what we say is only said in about 150 unique words. So if you use the words like, I don't know, like, nice, cool, why don't you try some other words that may say the same thing up your lexicon there? maybe just kind of increase your vernacular capacity there, you may find itself, you may find it pretty fun, actually. Okay, when do we learn language? Here we go. One of the things that's important when we talk about when we learn language is to understand that developmental milestones that we're going to talk about here are averages. So we always say, like in chapter 9, when we talk about development, the sequence is the same, but the timing varies. That's a really important point. I don't want you to think, oh man, I hit the one word stage at the age of 2, so I'm that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I would point out that there's two different types of language we want to contrast and juxtapose here. One is receptive language, the other one is productive language. Receptive language is understanding speech, whereas productive language is actually producing speech. It's important for you to understand that as children engage in this maturation process, their receptive language is far ahead of their productive language. You can tell a 2-year-old to do a whole lot, and that 2-year-old can't say a whole lot, but they can understand what their parents are saying with remarkable specificity. Okay, so let's advance it to the 3 stages we want to talk about. One is the babbling stage, right? And even before this, there's this whole cooing stage. I'm not going to get into all that, but that can start as early as 3 weeks. Let's get into the babbling stage. After about 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, babies start to utter these sounds. And really, these sounds are universal across languages. There was a study done where they looked at French kids, Korean kids, Ethiopian kids, and they could not differentiate in terms of their babbling stage babbles, right? Whether or not, baba, nana, tata, mama, all that stuff is very common where they're just kind of babbling. They couldn't differentiate, but you can start differentiating languages once you get to this one word stage. At around 12 months, a baby, they start to use one word to communicate in speech. They call this holographic speech, right? So, for example, a baby might say ball. Okay, well, that might mean a whole bunch of different things. That might mean, I would like the ball, please. Can you give me that ball? That might mean, where is the ball? I can't find the ball. That might mean, this orange I'm getting ready to eat looks like a ball. Right? There's a whole bunch of different things that children can communicate with one word. It would be really difficult for me and you to communicate with one word, but when you actually hear a child do it and you're interacting with a child, you find it actually pretty easy. And even easier than that is the 2-word stage. By about 24 months, you hear kids start to use what we call telegraphic speech, where they are uttering these kind of 2-word sentences. You just combine verbs and adjectives or nouns together, 2 at a time. Your book gives this comic where it's talking, it's got these cavemen, and it says, got idea, talk better, combine words, make sentences. Again, that's using telegraphic speech or the 2-word stage. And you hear, my daughter said this one time, want wah pop. Well, wah pop is a lollipop, and she was just telling me, could I please have that lollipop, please? It tastes good, and I would like to eat it, right? And then very shortly after this 2-word stage, kids' speech just explodes. So it's very cool to kind of watch how that happens. Now, some of you are going to be like, oh my gosh, this guy is about to show us a bunch of clips of his kid. I'm not doing this to show you clips of my child. Believe it or not, this took me about an hour and a half to put together because I had to go through all these old clips to find clips that I could show you of this cooing stage, into the babbling stage, into the 1-word stage, into the 2-word stage, into actually putting sentences together. So without further ado, the development of one Charlotte Ann Jones, one of the sweetest little girls in the world. Here she goes, if I can find her. Okay, Charlie, here she is, just a few months here. I don't know, maybe 6 months or so. And she's just going to mimic me doing a little type sound. Very serious and deliberate about that, actually. Okay, let's advance it. Now I'm going to say something, and she's going to try to kind of repeat it a little bit. Here's a little Bandura observational learning for you.
Hey, Charlotte. I love you. Hey, I love you. Yeah.
Okay, so not really making a whole lot of sense there. For some reason, this is upside down. You'll have to excuse it. But now all of a sudden, she's in the one-word stage. So she's going to say water, which means I would like that water.
What does a lion say? Oh, that's good. Sure.
And then let's go to, so I got the exact day before she turned 2. And you can hear how she's talking kind of here.
Are you going to be 2? Can you count to 2?
When we get up.
When you get up, you'll be 2. Can you count? Count for Mommy.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, and let's advance it now. This is probably right around the like 2.5-ish. Watch how quickly her. Well, I don't even know exactly how she goes here. We'll try it. I think she's in trouble for eating ice cream with a back scratcher. Actually, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Were you eating ice cream with it?
No.
Excuse me. Did you eat ice cream with it?
No, a little bit.
A little bit. Well, then that's yes. Give it to me. Okay, and then here she is at like 3, and you can see her putting sentences together pretty easily.
What, sweetheart?
And Mama made you a hot sandwich and a cold water and the hot water.
And you brought it out here for me? Thank you.
Do you want both?
I do. Thank you.
Do you want both? Obviously. Here we go when we're looking at these stages, right? And hopefully those examples kind of gave specificity to what I was talking about. Moving on ahead. I was going to have you do this thing if we were in class where I was going to have you communicate back and forth with telegraphic speech, telling each other what happened to you yesterday. But guess what? We're not in class. Okay, so there's this big debate over language acquisition. And B.F. Skinner, again, thought everything could be taught through operant conditioning. Right. Matter of fact, he wrote a book called Beyond Freedom and Dignity, where he was actively trying to, operant condition our way into a better society after the catastrophic results of World War I and World War II. Anyway, he represents kind of the nurture side of the argument. We're going to give his behaviorist approach here in a second, and then after that, we will give Noam Chomsky's approach. He says, man, this is just way too unbelievably complex, and they learn too quick for it to be operant conditioning. This is universal. This is innate. This is part of who we are. This is natural. And there's Noam Chomsky there with the double-pocketed jean shirt, and looks like some sort of glass that holds about 2 ounces. Noam is a pop culture icon. A lot of people really like Noam. Good for those people. I struggle with Noam a little bit. Here's Skinner, right? He says, look, there's association where we associate things with particular sounds, and then we come to learn those words. There's imitation, like I just showed you in the video clip, where I'm saying, like, I love you, and she says, I love you, right? So there's that, and then there's reinforcement when the child says something and you respond to that successfully. That gives them that reinforcement to get them to build on their existing learning. On the flip side, though, we have Chomsky, and there's a bunch of evidence for Chomsky's side. He studied language. He works at MIT. He is a guy that has really broken down language acquisition, and he says, look, there's just way too fast of a rate for a kid to be where they're at cognitively at age 1 and 2, and for them to be learning, after 2 about a dozen words each day. That's just happening way too fast for it to be, operant conditioning. There are these different things that underlie all human language, like nouns, verbs, and questions. So he believes in this universal grammar, which helps explain why we pick up language so quickly. There's a bunch of other evidence for this as well, but here's the basic idea. Cognitive neuroscience essentially says, okay, we'll embrace this in a complementary way. It's not going to be binary. It's not going to be all one or all the other. These work together, and we can come to understand, absolutely, we learn language through acquisition. We learn language through reinforcement. No doubt that there's some of what Skinner says that's true, but also uh, um, we come, uh, you know, uh, with like almost hardwired to be able to learn language very quick and in an expedient manner. The critical period. When we talk about a critical period, here's the thing. Sometimes we'll use the word critical period. Sometimes we'll use the word sensitive period. There is a difference, and I want to make sure you get this difference. Critical period, kind of suggests that there's this finite amount of time where a particular skill has to be learned. But a sensitive period is more like, well, it's ideal that it's learned within this amount of time. And if it's not learned, then, you may struggle learning. Even though it can be learned, it may not be learned in an optimal manner. When we talk about a critical period of language, man, it's you better learn a language before a particular time period, or your learning window might completely close. Children that don't learn to speak by like 8 or 9 really can't ever produce language, save some unbelievably miraculous examples. But we also know that once you do have the basic building block of one language, the older you get, the more you're going to struggle learning a new language. Like if you migrate to a new country with a new language at the age of 45, Rosetta Stone can help, but it's not going to get you fluent in that one particular language. You'll probably have a very significant accent in your native language, and you probably might have a hard time conforming to the nuances of that new language. Whereas a younger person, that period is still open, that critical period is still open, and you can typically do very well. That's why a lot of advocates of foreign language say, look, you got to get this foreign language into a young person early by elementary school and middle school. Otherwise, they're going to struggle with it significantly. Impairment of language, aphasia. There's 2 types of aphasia. And they're caused by 2 different things. The first one we want to look at is essentially we're asking ourselves what brain areas are involved in language processing and language speech. And when we get to language processing, you got to tip the cap to a French physician by the name of Paul Broca. In 1865, he comes up with and reports that damage to an area in your left frontal lobe, what we now call Broca's area, named after Paul, is going to result in a person struggling to form words, and a person struggling to speak words. I have a mnemonic device for this. When I say Broca's area, I think Broca's bloviating, like bloviating's talking too much. Broca's bloviating, Broca's bloviating. Some of you just added a word to your vocabulary right there. What can I say except you're welcome? Wernicke's area. 9 years later, a German investigator by the name of Karl Wernicke is going to discover that after damage to this area in the left temporal lobe, what is now called Wernicke's area, people could only speak meaningless words, and they couldn't understand speech, what we call receptive speech. They couldn't comprehend speech. One thing I want to keep in mind, the brain is lateralized. The brain, we have this hemispheric lateralization, and the left and right hemispheres of the brain we know are different. Both of these are in the left hemisphere. Oh, that's not a shocker at all, because we know left language, another mnemonic device, left language, and left literal, left language. When we talk about the left brain, there are specific areas in the left brain that are specialized. And like I say, with Broca's area, we're talking about speech, production of speech, and with Wernicke's area, we're talking about comprehension of speech. Where at exactly? Well, left hemisphere, right about there for Broca's area, right about there for Wernicke's area. Okay, frontal lobe, temporal lobe, relatively close together. What? Yeah, sure. We got a few memes. These bad luck Brian memes are so tragic for this poor kid. I bet you he's one of the most successful dudes of all time. I bet you that kid is with the sweater vest. Probably grew up to be Jim Tressel or something. When we look at these, here's a picture that I'm going to share with you as well, which will kind of help you. Today's neuroscience has absolutely confirmed what Broca was saying, what Wernicke was saying. But at the same time, what's up, Kobe? You come on in clean, brother. You're good. Um, you're good. You're good. Also, by the same token, we can say that um, while particular brain regions may seem to be localized and specialized in function, the brain acts as a whole. And there's a couple points of evidence for this. 3 studies in your book. I'll just highlight one of them. There are different neural networks for a whole lot of functions. So there's different neural networks for your native language versus your secondary language. So if you learn a new language, it's going to have a different neural network. Additionally, there's different neural networks for language, for example, nouns and verbs or objects and actions. So you can read a little bit about some of those studies there. The last thing we want to look at is Benjamin Lee Whorf's idea of linguistic determinism. He had this hypothesis that language determines the way we think, and it stood for a little bit, but there's a problem. Language definitely contributes to the way we think. It definitely influences the way we think, but it can't determine the way we think. And I'll give you one example. Have you ever thought of something that you did not have a word for? If you have, you just single-handedly disproved this idea of linguistic determinism. Like, I might see somebody and I'd be like, I see a particular pair of shoes they have, and I'm like, I don't know what they call those shoes. I don't know names of shoes. Crocs, or some people will call them, sandal sliders, right? I have a picture in my head about what they look like, but I didn't have the word until I later had to ask the question. Just the fact that I had a picture in my head about what something looked like, whereas I did not have the word, right? Speaking of sliders, now I'm thinking of a restaurant that serves sliders. I don't even know what it's called. Evidence that I can think about something and not know the name of it. Therefore, language doesn't determine the way that I think. By the way, what I was thinking of is a restaurant by the name of White Castle. Not too terribly bad of a miniature burger there. My friends, in the words of the great Stanley Hudson, I'm done.